What if I told you that you are physically incapable of hearing certain layers of your favorite song, just simply because you don't have the vocabulary to describe them? Sounds kind of crazy, right?
It really does. But it is a profound concept when you actually get into it. We often think of language as just a tool for labeling things that, already exist in our minds.
Yeah, like grabbing a label maker and just slapping a sticker on a feeling you already have.
Exactly. But cognitive linguistics, and specifically the framework we are looking at today, suggests something much more radical. If you lack the specific word to describe a musical phenomenon, your brain might actually just gloss over it completely.
Wow, so you literally just don't hear it. Like, you don't have the cognitive bucket to catch that specific drop of water.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
You simply don't have the bucket. So by upgrading our musical vocabulary, we aren't just learning new words to sound sophisticated.
Right.
We are literally training our nervous system to isolate, process, and experience entirely new frequencies of emotion and sound. It fundamentally changes the listener.
Okay, let's unpack this, because today's source material is, well, it's essentially a linguistic roadmap.
It is, yeah, a very detailed one.
Right, and it breaks down how humans talk about music into 4 distinct proficiency levels. It goes from the absolute baseline, gut reaction language, all the way up to incredibly complex cultural and philosophical critiques.
And the journey between those levels is just fascinating.
It really is. So the mission of this deep dive is to explore how those words dictate our depth of connection to the music we listen to, like every single day.
Exactly. The core premise we are dealing with is that language gives shape to our world. When we give you a new linguistic structure, we are effectively giving you a new set of ears.
A new set of ears. I love that.
And the source material maps this out beautifully. It starts with what it calls the A2 foundational level. This is, where everyone begins their journey.
Right, the foundation. And at this level, we're talking about the absolute basics. Things like I like, I love, or I hate.
Yes, very visceral terms.
It's sorting music into those massive foundational buckets. Like, you don't need a fancy music degree to know if you enjoy pop, rock, hip-hop, classical jazz, or electronic music.
You really don't, and this is where we have to look at the psychology of that baseline. At this stage, the vocabulary is entirely binary. It's functional.
Binary, like a computer code almost. 0 or 1. Thumbs up or thumbs down.
Precisely. You identify an artist or a band you love, like Queen or the Beatles or Adele, and you describe their work using these visceral contrasting adjectives. Is the song fast or slow?
Is it loud or quiet? Is it happy or sad?
Exactly. And from an evolutionary standpoint, human beings are wired to react to sound before we even have time to consciously process it.
Oh, like a survival instinct.
Yes. A sudden loud noise, a rapid rhythm, these trigger our fight or flight responses, while a slow, quiet humming lowers our heart rate.
That makes total sense. So when a listener operates at this foundational level saying, I like fast, loud music at the gym.
Or, I prefer quiet, slow music when I study.
Yeah, exactly. They are directly linking auditory stimuli to their own nervous system regulation.
They are. They aren't analyzing the art at all. They are using it like a tool.
Yeah, it's like an energy drink or, a sleeping pill.
That is a perfect way to conceptualize it. It is entirely functional. The core verb here is to like. It's just a declaration of personal utility.
But wait, doesn't staying at that level limit you? I mean, if your entire vocabulary for music is just a thumbs up or a thumbs down, doesn't that mean you're missing out on the actual art?
That is the assumption a lot of people make, yes.
Or is there actually a kind of purity in just knowing what makes your foot tap without, overthinking the math behind it?
What's fascinating here is that this seemingly simple binary vocabulary is describing a profoundly visceral experience that you can never bypass, no matter how much of an expert you become.
So even the music snobs still feel it?
Absolutely. Yes, the language is basic, but we should never underestimate the power of the baseline. These simple terms matter immensely because they form the absolute core of our musical identity.
I guess I'm a little stuck on that. How does saying, I like fast rock music, form an identity?
Well, because even the most complex, intricate, hour-long symphonies with hundreds of instruments playing in perfect mathematical coordination, they ultimately have to boil down to human emotional responses.
Right, like does it make you happy or sad?
Exactly. That foundational language captures the raw, unfiltered impact of the art. And furthermore, it acts as the primary sorting mechanism for human connection.
Oh, I see. It's like tribalism.
Yeah.
That's how you find your people.
Yes. When you meet someone new, you don't instantly start discussing the harmonic complexities of a track. You ask, what kind of music do you like?
And finding out you both love the same massive pop star, or you both absolutely hate loud, aggressive electronic music that builds an instant bridge.
It establishes a shared baseline of emotional regulation. You cannot analyze a song's structural brilliance together if you haven't first decided whether or not it moves you on that primitive level.
So it's the gateway. And I guess once you've figured out that a song makes you want to dance, your brain naturally wants to know what's triggering that physical reaction, right?
It does. Human curiosity takes over,
You want to know how the magic trick works?
which naturally forces your vocabulary to evolve. You move from the internal declaration of I love this to the external exploration of here is exactly how this is built.
The source text frames this as the B1 level, right? The explorer phase.
Yes, the explorer. This is where you begin to dissect the anatomy of the track. You aren't just reacting anymore.
You start taking the engine apart.
Yeah.
And the most immediate way we do that, at least according to the guide, is by separating the lyrics from the melody and the melody from the rhythm.
Which sounds simple when we say it out loud, but conceptually, it's a huge leap for a listener.
Yeah, because you're no longer just experiencing this massive wall of sound. You are identifying the words, the tune you hum, and the heartbeat of the track as three distinct forces.
And once your brain separates those elements, it requires new adjectives to describe how they interact with each other. This is where we see the introduction of words that describe mechanical effect.
Rather than just raw emotion.
Exactly. For instance, the source text highlights the word catchy.
Oh, everyone knows that feeling. A catchy song just burrows into your brain and sets up camp. You wake up singing it while brushing your teeth.
But look at what the word catchy actually implies. It implies a specific architectural design in the melody and the rhythm.
So it's not an accident.
No, not at all. A catchy song is engineered for memory retention. When you call a song catchy, you are acknowledging its design.
Wow, I never thought of it that way. You're praising the engineering.
Similarly, transitioning from calling a song happy to calling it upbeat is a very significant shift in perception.
Because happy is just your internal emotional state, right? Like, I feel happy.
Yes. But upbeat describes the actual tempo and energetic output of the music itself. You are analyzing the object, not just the subject.
Or moving from quiet to mellow. Because quiet is just a volume level on your phone. But mellow is an atmosphere. It's a cultivated vibe.
It's the difference between saying, I feel relaxed, and saying, this music possesses a relaxing quality. You are projecting the agency onto the art itself.
And speaking of atmosphere, this is also where we get the language of the live experience, isn't it? The source material spends time distinguishing between massive concerts and intimate gigs.
It does. And how we talk about the energy in those specific rooms is a crucial aspect of musical culture.
Because music is not just recorded audio you play in your headphones. It is a shared physical space.
Exactly. The ability to articulate the atmosphere of a crowded, sweaty gig where everyone is singing the lyrics back to the artist that requires a specific vocabulary of communal experience.
It also requires us to talk about what that communal experience does to our brains, the psychological impact of it all.
Yes, like using music to unwind after a really chaotic week at work.
Or putting on a specific playlist to manufacture a good mood before a party.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this specific evolution in vocabulary serves a vital social function. Language, at its core, is about bridging the gap between two isolated minds.
Right. Because when you are just experiencing the magic of a song internally at that A2 foundational level, it is a completely solitary event.
It is locked inside your head. You can't share the actual feeling.
You're just sitting there with goosebumps and nobody knows why. It's almost lonely.
But when you acquire the vocabulary to articulate why it is magical, when you can explain to a friend that the lyrics are deeply introspective, but they are juxtaposed against this incredibly upbeat, catchy melody, you are doing something profound.
You are providing them with the map to your internal experience.
You are saying, here is the exact combination of sounds that is currently making my brain release dopamine.
And if you listen to these specific parts, maybe your brain will do it too. That is so cool.
Exactly. You are transforming a solitary internal listening experience into a shared social reality. Being able to describe the atmosphere of a gig or how a specific rhythm compels physical movement Invite someone else into your perspective.
You aren't just telling them how you feel, you're showing them the mechanics of that feeling.
That's it. Perfect.
And I have to ask this, doesn't taking the engine apart ruin the drive?
How do you mean?
Well, if I'm sitting there mentally separating the melody from the beat and analyzing whether the lyrics match the upbeat tempo, doesn't dissecting it like a science experiment completely kill the magic of just, enjoying the music?
That is a very common fear, but neurologically speaking, the exact opposite is true.
Wait, really? It makes it better.
Yes. Attention enhances perception. When you actively listen for the interplay between a rhythm and a melody, your brain actually recruits more neural pathways to process the sound.
Oh, wow.
You aren't diminishing the magic. You are zooming in on it. You are experiencing the music with much higher fidelity.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. And it perfectly explains the next massive shift in the source materials framework. Because once you know how the engine works, you inevitably start comparing it to other engines.
You do. You step out of your own personal experience entirely and become the analyst.
The B2 level. And this feels like a dramatic psychological pivot in the text.
It is a massive pivot. You are no longer just describing how a song makes you feel, or even how it is mechanically constructed in isolation.
Right. You are adopting this objective, critical stance. You are evaluating the art against a broader historical and cultural context.
This is where we start talking about an artist's entire discography.
We stop judging them on one catchy tune and look at their life's work. Like, how did their debut album compare to their latest release?
Exactly. Did they have a massive, inescapable smash hit that defined a whole summer? And if so, how did they follow it up?
Did they sell out or did they grow? And to make those comparisons, you need a vocabulary of categorization.
You begin to map where an artist sits within the broader industry ecosystem.
The source material contrasts terms here, right? Like mainstream versus alternative.
Yes. Mainstream refers to art that is explicitly engineered for widespread commercial appeal and accessibility. It's meant for the masses.
And it contrasts that with alternative or indie art that positions itself outside the conventional commercial structures.
Art that often prioritizes unconventional structures or very niche appeal over radio play.
You also start looking at the artist's utility belt at this level. Like, are they versatile? Can they effortlessly switch from a stripped-down acoustic ballad to a massive electronic dance track?
Versatility becomes a major metric for talent.
But here's where it gets really interesting to me. It's the language of critique. This is where the gloves come off.
The language of critique at this level is incredibly nuanced because it allows you to hold two opposing ideas at the exact same time.
Yeah, the source provides a brilliant distinction between two positive attributes: musicianship and songwriting.
Right. And they are not the same thing at all.
Musicianship is the raw, technical athleticism of playing an instrument, isn't it? It's the guitarist shredding a solo at lightning speed, or a vocalist hitting a note that shatters glass.
Yes, it's proficiency. But songwriting is the architectural genius of the track itself. It's the storytelling, the pacing, the emotional arc.
And because you now have those two distinct words, you can formulate a highly sophisticated critique. You can say their musicianship is undeniable, but their songwriting is lacking.
Exactly. You are acknowledging immense technical skill while simultaneously pointing out a deficit in creative structure.
And the negative critiques at this level are just brutal. You don't just say, I hate this anymore.
No, you say it's generic or uninspired.
You call it overproduced. You say you can hear their influences too clearly, meaning they basically ripped off a 1970s funk band and brought absolutely nothing new to the table.
It is a profound shift from subjective feeling to objective evaluation.
But is this subjective evaluation actually real? I mean, think about the word overproduced or calling a pop star's new album generic.
What's your hesitation there?
Isn't that just a fancy intellectualized way of saying, I don't like it? It feels like we were just taking our basic caveman level thumbs down reaction and dressing it up in a tuxedo to sound smarter than we are.
Like, oh, I don't dislike it, it's just uninspired.
Yeah, like we're hiding behind the big words.
This raises an important question about the nature of criticism and human bias. It is absolutely true that people often use complex vocabulary as a shield for their subjective tastes.
Right, it makes you sound more authoritative.
However, from a linguistic perspective, the B2 tuxedo is not just a disguise, it is a magnifying glass.
Okay, sell me on the magnifying glass. How is it not just a disguise?
Think about it like upgrading a television. The foundational A2 language is like watching a movie in standard definition.
Okay, old school TV.
Right. You get the plot, you understand who the good guys and bad guys are, and you feel the basic emotions. But the B2 language upgrades you to 4K resolution.
Suddenly everything is super sharp.
Exactly. Suddenly you can see the brushstrokes on the set design, you can see the makeup on the actors' faces. You are perceiving a layer of reality that was always there, but you didn't have the technological capability to render it before.
So when I call a band generic, I'm rendering a specific flaw. I'm not just hating on them.
Yes. Look at the specific tension the source text highlights between mainstream success and artistic innovation.
The example of the really talented band.
Right. The text gives an example of analyzing a band that is objectively incredibly talented. Their musicianship is flawless. They play their instruments perfectly in time, perfectly in tune.
So if you were stuck at the foundational level, you might be forced to say, I like them, simply because the music is competent and doesn't sound bad to the ear.
Because it's fast and loud and played well, yes. But with the B2 magnifying glass, you can say, I recognize the technical execution here is perfect. However, I find the sound to be entirely generic.
Because they aren't doing anything new.
Exactly. What you are articulating is a lack of originality. You are observing that the artist has borrowed heavily from their predecessors, assembled those pieces perfectly, but failed to inject any new, innovative perspective into the cultural conversation.
You are separating the mechanical execution from the artistic soul.
Precisely. You are identifying a structural void in the art.
Wow. So you can objectively admit a song is good, or at least well-made, while subjectively explaining why it fails as art. That is a massive cognitive leap.
It is the birth of the critic. You are holding the music up to a set of standards that exist completely outside of your own personal nervous system.
Which perfectly sets the stage for the final and undoubtedly the most intense evolution in this linguistic journey.
It's a transition from the analyst to the cultural theorist.
Yes, the C1 and C2 level. And here, the camera pans way, way back. We are stepping out of the recording studio, out of the critic's chair, and we are looking at music as a profound, world-shaping cultural force.
This is where the vocabulary transcends music entirely. It becomes deeply interdisciplinary.
Because to talk about music at this level, you have to draw on concepts from sociology, political science, history, and even philosophy, right?
You do. You have to understand the world the music was born into.
And the source material breaks this summit into three main pillars: aesthetics, music theory, and cultural impact.
Let's start with aesthetics, because this is where the language gets incredibly descriptive and granular.
We aren't just talking about melodies anymore. We are talking about timbre. That's spelled T-I-M-B-R-E, but pronounced timbre.
Yes, timbre is one of the most fascinating concepts in all of auditory processing. It is defined as the unique quality or the tone color of a sound.
Tone color. I love that phrase.
It is the specific characteristic that allows your brain to distinguish between a piano and a guitar playing the exact same note at the exact same volume for the exact same duration.
The sonic fingerprint.
Exactly. It's why a trumpet sounds like a trumpet and not a flute. And the source text is a great example of a singer with a raw, raspy timbre.
So it's not about what notes they're hitting. It's about the physical texture of the sound vibrating in their vocal cords.
It is the physical reality of the sound source.
I always like to think of timbre like a master painter's specific mix of colors on a palette. Like you could have two brilliant artists paint the exact same bowl of fruit, right?
Right.
The dimensions are the same, the lighting is the same, but the specific microscopic mix of pigments one artist uses makes their painting completely unique and impossible to forge.
That specific mix is their timbre, a very apt analogy.
And when you combine the timbres of dozens of different instruments and voices, you create what the source calls sonic texture.
Yes, sonic texture. This refers to the density and the complexity of the layers of sound in a recording.
Like a thick blanket of sound versus a thin, wispy sheet.
Exactly. A producer might weave a dense, complex sonic texture where every single time you listen to the track, you discover a new layer hidden beneath the surface.
Oh, I love albums like that. Where on the 10th listen, you suddenly hear a tiny bell in the background.
It's about how the individual threads of sound, all those different timbres, create a larger, cohesive tapestry.
And then the guide briefly touches on the underlying math of it all, music theory. But it focuses on how theory manipulates human psychology.
Yes, it brings up harmonic complexity and the intentional use of dissonance.
Dissonance. That is such a heavy word.
Dissonance is incredibly powerful. By definition, it is a lack of harmony among musical notes. It is a clashing sound.
It's the sound of anxiety. Like nails on a chalkboard, but musical.
Exactly. And that feeling of anxiety is by design. The human brain naturally seeks resolution in all things, including sound.
We want the neat ending.
Right. When we hear a chord progression, we unconsciously anticipate where it is going to end. We want the mathematical neatness of a resolved chord. It feels safe.
So dissonance is the intentional denial of that resolution.
It is. The composer uses clashing notes to evoke a feeling of unease, tension, or even dread in the listener. They are actively weaponizing the physics of sound to manipulate your psychological state.
They are holding you in suspense. But that manipulation isn't just for, horror movie soundtracks.
No, it's used in all genres to create emotional stakes.
Which brings us to the most expansive pillar of this advanced level, music's cultural role. The source makes it clear that music isn't just entertainment. It is often the very vehicle for political consciousness.
We are looking at music as an anthem for social and political movements. The vocabulary here shifts to encompass the historical weight of the art.
Right. Now, we are impartial here, but the guide specifically points to the vital role of protest songs in the 1960s civil rights and anti-war movements.
And it also notes the emergence of hip-hop as a raw, unfiltered form of social commentary.
The word it uses to describe these critiques is poignant. A poignant critique of social inequality.
Poignant is a very specific, powerful word.
It's a word that means it evokes a keen sense of sadness or regret. It's not just an angry protest, it's a deeply felt, sorrowful reflection on the state of the world.
And when artists engage in this level of social commentary, it immediately sparks one of the most intense and ongoing debates in all of music criticism.
The debate over authenticity.
Yes, the authenticity debate.
Oh, authenticity. That is such a loaded word. I mean, what makes an artist or genre authentic?
The source text dives right into the paradox of it. It points out the constant debate about whether massive, mainstream commercial success inevitably compromises an artist's authenticity.
Because it's a fascinating sociological paradox, right?
It truly is. Consider the life cycle of this kind of art. An artist creates something born out of genuine struggle, whether that's poverty, systemic oppression, or deep psychological pain.
It is raw, it is poignant, it is anti-establishment.
Exactly. And the public deeply connects with that authentic rawness. It resonates because it's true. But because they connect with it so massively, the artist becomes incredibly successful.
And suddenly the person singing about the struggles of the working class is, flying on a private jet and playing stadium tours sponsored by massive tech corporations.
Exactly. The context of the creator changes drastically.
So does the private jet automatically negate the truth of the lyrics? Does the wealth compromise the art they're still trying to make?
That is the core of the debate. The word authenticity forces you to examine the relationship between the creator's current lived reality and the art they are producing.
It asks whether true art can even exist inside the machinery of mass commerce.
It's a question without a simple answer, but having the vocabulary to ask it is what matters.
Which brings us to the absolute pinnacle of this cultural analysis, the final boss of musical vocabulary, if you will, the zeitgeist.
Ah, the zeitgeist. It is a German loanword, literally translating to the spirit of the times.
The spirit of the times?
Yes. It is defined as the defining spirit, the mood, or the overarching beliefs of a particular period in history.
And the example the source uses for this is just iconic. It highlights Nirvana's album, Nevermind.
A perfect example of the concept.
It states that Nevermind is frequently cited by cultural historians as the album that perfectly captured the zeitgeist of the early 1990s, primarily because it articulated the deep apathy and angst of an entire generation.
Now, think about what a massive claim that is to make about a piece of recorded audio.
It's huge.
You are stating that a collection of rock songs is actually a historical document, a document that summarizes the collective psyche of millions of people at a specific moment in time.
So what does this all mean for the person just, trying to enjoy their morning commute?
How do you mean?
We've gone from tapping our toes to talking about timbre, dissonance, poignant social commentary, the paradox of authenticity, and the zeitgeist of a generation.
It's quite a leap.
Does knowing these words actually change what happens when you press play in your car? Or is this all just an academic flexing exercise for sociologists and philosophers who want to sound the smartest in the room while listening to the radio?
I assure you, it is absolutely not an academic flex. Remember our core premise from the beginning. Language gives shape to the world.
Right. The new set of years.
Understanding these concepts fundamentally and permanently alters the listening experience because it allows you to deconstruct the music as a cultural artifact in real time.
Deconstruct it as an artifact. Make that real for me. What does that actually sound like in the headphones?
Let's use the Nirvana example from the text. Let's run Nevermind through all 4 levels of our linguistic roadmap.
Okay, let's do it.
If you are operating at the foundational A2 level, you hear Nevermind and you think, this is loud, fast rock music. It makes me want to jump around. I like it.
It is entirely visceral, pure energy.
Exactly. Now, what happens if you upgrade to the B1 Explorer?
At B1, you hear the album and you think, the drums are incredibly energetic, but the vocal melody is surprisingly catchy. It's a great album to put on when you want to get hyped up.
Right. You are analyzing the mechanics and the utility. Now let's move to the B2 analyst.
The B2 analyst puts on the glasses and says, their musicianship is raw, and the production is intentionally stripped back compared to the overproduced pop music of the late 80s. This is a groundbreaking entry in their discography that brought alternative indie music into the mainstream.
A very solid, objective critique. You understand its place in the industry.
Okay, so that's a great review.
Yeah.
But what happens when you finally apply that C1, C2 vocabulary? When you apply the concept of the zeitgeist?
When you apply the zeitgeist, you hear everything we just mentioned, but you also hear the history swirling around the notes.
You hear the context.
Yes. You understand that the jarring dissonance of Kurt Cobain's guitar and the raw, unpolished timbre of his voice are not just aesthetic choices to make the song sound cool.
They are a historical mirror.
They are. They're giving a voice to a generation that felt completely alienated by the corporate greed and superficiality of the decade prior.
You hear the painful tension of a deeply authentic punk band, suddenly thrust into massive, uncomfortable mainstream fame.
Exactly. Understanding those words transforms the album from a catchy piece of entertainment into a profound, tragic, and beautiful reflection of the human experience at a specific moment in time.
It deepens the empathy of the listener.
It does. You aren't just hearing sound anymore. You are hearing society. You are hearing the human condition.
Wow. It really is like unlocking a new sense entirely. The music itself doesn't change, but your capacity to receive it expands exponentially.
And that brings us to the end of the source materials roadmap. It really is incredible to look back at the sheer scale of the journey we've just taken.
It is a remarkable scaffolding of human cognition.
We started all the way down at the bedrock, the A2 foundation.
The visceral fight-or-flight reactions of I love it or I hate it, identifying the big tribal buckets like pop, hip-hop, and rock, and using binary functional terms like fast, slow, loud, and quiet to regulate our own nervous systems.
From there, we evolved into the B1 Explorer. We took the engine apart.
We separated the lyrics from the melody and the beat. We learned to describe the social reality of the music. The catchy hooks, the mellow vibes, the atmosphere of a crowded gig.
And the psychological relief of using music to unwind.
Then we upgraded our resolution to 4K. We became B2 analysts. We stopped judging single songs and started evaluating entire discographies.
We debated whether an artist was groundbreaking and innovative, or if their unquestionable musicianship was wasted on a generic, uninspired, overproduced sound.
We learned to separate the technical execution from the artistic soul.
And finally, we reached the summit as C1, C2 cultural theorists. We learned to identify the unique sonic fingerprint of a timbre.
And the psychological manipulation of dissonance. We explored music as a vehicle for poignant political commentary. We wrestled with the paradox of authenticity.
And we saw how an album can serve as a historical mirror, capturing the zeitgeist of an entire generation.
It really is a superpower. And I want to speak directly to you, the listener, right now. Think about what this linguistic toolkit means for your daily life.
It changes everything.
The next time you are driving in your car, or you're at the grocery store, or you're sitting alone in your room and a song comes on, you are no longer limited to just feeling the goosebumps and saying, it has a good beat.
You have so much more to draw from.
Whether it's a 3-minute pop anthem or a complex classical symphony, you now possess the words to map that internal magic. You can express everything from simple, unfiltered joy to complex, deeply analytical societal critiques about the soundtrack of your life.
You have the vocabulary to match the true depth of your experience. The gap between what you feel and what you can articulate has been completely closed.
But as we conclude this deep dive, there was one final provocative thought that emerges from all of this, isn't there?
There is, yes. A new frontier that the source material doesn't explicitly mention, but one that you should absolutely mull over on your own.
Oh, where does the roadmap go next?
Well, we have spent this entire time discussing the language we use to describe human creation. Every word we've explored, the raw timbre of a human vocal cord, the authentic struggle of an impoverished artist.
The way a band captures the zeitgeist of human apathy or angst.
Exactly. All of it is entirely predicated on the existence of a human soul on the other side of the microphone. But we are rapidly entering an era where artificial intelligence can instantly generate complex, mathematically perfect music.
Wow. Yeah, it's true. AI can create a catchy pop song or a dense symphony in a matter of seconds now.
So, as this technology advances and becomes completely indistinguishable from human creation, how will this vocabulary we just learned evolve?
If an artificial intelligence writes a flawless, perfectly constructed smash hit, can that AI truly be said to capture the zeitgeist?
Can an algorithm understand the spirit of our times, or is it just mimicking the data we fed into it?
It's just reflecting our own data back at us. Furthermore, can AI music possess authenticity?
If authenticity is defined by the tension between human struggle and commercial success, what does that word even mean when applied to a machine?
A machine that has never felt pain, never struggled for rent, and has no concept of commerce.
As we move into this new frontier, will we need to invent an entirely new fifth level of language to describe our relationship with music that was not created by a human being?
Or will the words we have be enough to trick ourselves into feeling the same magic?
Yeah.
That is a chilling and absolutely fascinating question to leave on.
It certainly gives you a lot to think about.
It brings us full circle.
Yeah.
Remember at the very beginning, we talked about how a song hits you like a physical force, and you struggle to find the words to explain why.
Oh, we did.
Well, as the source of that music begins to change, as the weather is increasingly generated by machines, understanding the mechanics of why we feel what we feel is going to be more important than ever. You have the toolkit now. Use it. Until next time, keep listening, keep questioning, and keep searching for the words that give shape to your soundtrack. Imagine walking out of a movie theater. The credits are rolling, the house lights are, just starting to flicker on, and you're tossing your empty popcorn bucket into the trash. And you have this immediate, almost like burning desire to turn to the person next to you and just speak.
Oh, yeah. It's totally universal.
Right. It's a universal human experience. You've just sat in the dark for 2 hours, completely surrendered to this simulated reality, and the second it ends, there's this desperate urge to vocalize what you just went through. Welcome to the deep dive, by the way. Today we are looking at the evolving language we use to talk about movies and television.
It's honestly like a biological reflex. You step out of that sensory deprivation back into the jarring reality of, the lobby carpet and those glaring fluorescent lights.
That's the worst lights.
Truly the worst. And your brain is just scrambling to process the emotional manipulation it just endured. You need to anchor the experience. And really, the only tool you have to do that is language.
But the words you choose in that exact post-credit moment, they don't just describe the movie.
Yeah.
I'd argue they completely define the reality of your experience.
Absolutely.
Think about it. Whether you turn to your friend and just say, wow, that was awesome. Or you say, the cinematography was breathtaking. Or maybe you lean in and whisper, the subtext was a brilliant commentary on the human condition.
Which is quite the thing to whisper in a lobby.
Right, totally. But that choice of vocabulary actually changes how you and the person you were talking to understand the art you just consumed. So our mission today is to give you a complete multi-level guide to talking about film and TV. We're going to scaffold from simple preferences all the way up to deconstructing a director's underlying vision.
And it scales the experience, right? The language you possess dictates the resolution of the image in your memory. And that is such a fascinating angle to take, especially looking at the source material we were unpacking today. We have this really comprehensive linguistic breakdown of how we talk about cinema.
Yeah, it acts as a roadmap.
Exactly. Tracing how a viewer scales their vocabulary from the most basic foundational expressions of preference all the way up to highly advanced scholarly film theory.
And what I found so compelling about these sources is this underlying idea that discussing what we watch is essentially our modern-day campfire story.
Oh, I love that analogy.
Though maybe the campfire metaphor is a bit nostalgic. Today, it's less about survival tactics in the woods and more about the cultural conversation. The screen is the fire, and the way we talk about it dictates whether we just feel a bit of warmth or if we actually understand how the fire was built.
Yeah, the campfire analogy really holds up if we look at its historical function, which is creating a shared reality. Like a movie can prompt a simple gut-level reaction, or it can spark a complex, hour-long cultural debate that touches on philosophy and politics.
Which is wild when you think about it.
It is. And which of those two scenarios plays out depends entirely on the linguistic toolkit the viewers bring to the conversation.
Right, so let's start at the ground floor with that toolkit. Before you can debate the philosophical nuances of a film's ending, you have to be able to express a baseline reaction.
You have to know what kind of wood you're throwing on the fire.
Exactly. You have to know what kind of media you are engaging with. Our sources map out this foundational level. They call it the A2 level, which revolves around the most fundamental verbs of preference. Stuff like, love, and don't like.
Right. These are the essential boundary lines of taste. I like comedies. I love action movies. I don't like horror movies.
It seems so basic.
It does seem incredibly rudimentary, but these simple declarative sentences are highly efficient tools for finding common ground with another human being.
Because they immediately establish the cognitive contract you are willing to sign with a piece of media. If I say I like comedies, I am telling you that my primary goal in consuming media right now is just to be amused.
You're looking for a specific emotional return on your investment of time.
Which brings us to the concept of genre. The sources highlight the core genres that basically dominate our media diet. Action, comedy, drama, romance, sci-fi, which is science fiction, fantasy, and horror.
And a genre is fundamentally just a style or category, but functionally, it operates as an emotional shortcut. When you say, I like comedies because they're funny, or I don't like horror movies because they were too scary, you are mapping a cinematic category directly onto a baseline human emotion.
You are clearly stating how you want to feel.
Or, perhaps more importantly, how you refuse to feel when you look at a screen.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because that refusal is interesting. Saying, I don't like horror because it's scary isn't a critique of the film's quality at all.
No, not at all.
It's just a complete rejection of the emotional state the genre demands. But we don't just use broad category names to set these expectations. We also use the people involved as shorthand. The actor, the actress, the director. The sources mention actors like Tom Hanks or Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and directors like Christopher Nolan.
Dwayne Johnson is the absolute perfect case study for this.
100%.
If someone tells you they enjoy Dwayne Johnson movies because they're very exciting, they aren't really talking about his nuanced theatrical range,
Right. They're not looking for an Oscar-winning monologue.
Exactly. They are using the actor as a stand-in for the genre itself. His physical presence on a movie poster promises a very specific type of physical thrill, a certain pacing, a guaranteed level of spectacle.
You see his face, and you just know you're getting explosions. Probably a jungle setting.
Always a jungle.
Always. And at least one scene where he raises a skeptical eyebrow. I mean, he is a walking, breathing genre at this point. And conversely, the sources point out that someone might say, I prefer dramas. Sometimes they're sad, but they are often very interesting.
Yeah, and here we see foundational adjectives like sad or interesting being used to signal a preference for emotional complexity over the, kinetic spectacle of an action movie.
These adjectives at this foundational level are fascinating to me because they are entirely unpretentious, like good, bad, funny, sad, interesting, boring, scary.
They aren't trying to impress anyone with analytical rigor. They are just raw, unfiltered reports of the nervous system's reaction to the media.
But without them, you are totally lost. Imagine trying to navigate a streaming service without the concepts of funny or scary. You wouldn't even know where to begin. It really reminds me of being in a foreign country where you don't speak the language, walking into a restaurant and just pointing at a picture of a hamburger on the menu.
That's a great way to put it.
You smile, you point, and you just say, I like this. And it works. It successfully gets you the food, it establishes your basic preference, and you don't go hungry.
It completely solves the immediate problem of consumption.
But, and here is the limitation pointing at the picture, doesn't allow you to describe the complex flavors of the dish at all. You can't talk about the seasoning, the sear on the meat, or the texture of the bun. You just know you ate a burger and it was good. And that is where the human impulse to share experiences just hits a brick wall.
which naturally forces the vocabulary to evolve. Once you have established your static preferences, the natural next social impulse is to pull other people into your campfire circle by explaining what happens in the story.
Right.
You have to move from foundational language to dynamic storytelling language. This is what the sources call the B1 level. You become an explorer of the narrative.
And this requires a major cognitive leap. We have to make a real distinction between a general story and a plot. People use those terms interchangeably all the time, but they serve completely different functions when you are trying to convince a friend to watch something.
Oh, absolutely. If you just recount the story, you are giving a chronological list of events. This happened, and then this happened, and then the movie ended.
Which is incredibly dry.
It's so dry. But the plot introduces the engine of causality. It explains why things are happening.
So if I'm tracking this correctly based on the sources, a story is just a detective went to a house and then a woman disappeared. But the plot introduces the mechanics. Like a young woman's brother disappears, so she teams up with a detective to investigate the mystery.
Exactly. It sets up the stakes. It gives the listener the hook.
It provides structural momentum. And once you have established that momentum, you need people to drive it. At this level of language, we introduce essential character dynamics. You have the main character, often the hero, and the villain, the bad guy.
But we aren't just calling them good or bad anymore, right? The adjectives get a serious upgrade. We start describing the main character as brave, smart, or determined. The villain becomes evil or cunning.
And the reason we do this is essentially to transfer empathy, right?
Empathy transfer is exactly the mechanism at play here. If you tell a coworker, the main character is so smart and determined, you really want her to succeed, you aren't just describing her personality traits. You are instructing your coworker on how they should emotionally orient themselves to the narrative before they even press play.
Oh, wow. So you are pre-programming their emotional response.
You are setting them up to feel the exact same investment you felt. And our evaluations of the overall experience become a lot more sophisticated too. We graduate from saying a movie was just good or interesting to calling it entertaining or moving, meaning it created strong internal emotions.
And we also gain the ability to express structural disappointment.
Yes, through words like predictable.
Which is, the absolute worst thing you can call a thriller.
It is a devastating critique at the narrative level because the exact opposite of predictable is a plot full of twists and turns.
Right.
When you promise someone twists and turns, you are promising them that their brain will be actively engaged in trying to solve a puzzle, and that the puzzle will successfully outsmart them. A predictable plot is just a puzzle that solves itself, which is inherently boring.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. This exploration of narrative structure brings us to a fascinating intersection in the sources regarding the modern TV lexicon. Specifically, the terms binge-watching and the cliffhanger ending.
Ah, yes. The twin pillars of modern streaming culture.
Binge-watching being, of course, the act of consuming many episodes in a compressed time frame, and the cliffhanger being the narrative device of stopping an episode at a moment of excruciating suspense.
They go hand in hand perfectly.
But I want to push back on this a little and really look at the relationship between these two terms.
Yeah.
Because the sources present them almost neutrally, as just structural elements of TV. But I'd argue a cliffhanger isn't just a structural choice. It is a highly manipulative psychological tool.
What do you mean?
Well, it essentially forces binge watching because the human brain just struggles to tolerate unresolved suspense. It feels like this specific language highlights a shift in our relationship with media-like. We go from being viewers who passively enjoy a story to obsessive consumers who are quite literally trapped in a behavioral loop.
That is a very sharp critique of the architecture of modern media. And actually, the history of the term supports your suspicion entirely. The cliffhanger was originally popularized in serialized fiction. Think of Charles Dickens publishing novels one chapter at a time in periodicals.
Oh, right.
Leaving the hero hanging off a literal cliff was a commercial imperative. It ensured you bought the newspaper the following week.
So it was always a commercial hook.
Always. But in the era of streaming, the mechanics have completely changed. You don't have to wait a week anymore. The next episode autoplays in, 5 seconds?
Yeah, if you don't scramble for the remote in time.
Right. So the cliffhanger isn't just a hook to bring you back anymore. It is a weaponized mechanism to prevent you from leaving. It creates a deficit of closure in the viewer's brain.
A deficit of closure. I really like that phrasing.
So when you're at a dinner party and you say, the season finale ended on a huge cliffhanger, I stayed up until 3 a.m. binge watching, you are casually using language that acknowledges the creators successfully hacked your attention span.
Yeah.
The term binge itself implies a complete loss of moderation. We don't binge things that we are consuming thoughtfully, chewing slowly, and reflecting upon. We binge things that bypass our self-control entirely.
It really is the language of addiction, just sort of sanitized and applied to entertainment. But possessing this vocabulary, being able to summarize the plot, define the brave characters, warn of cliffhangers, and promise those twists and turns, it allows you to execute the final, most crucial function of this narrative level, which is the recommendation.
Yes, the recommendation is where the private viewing experience is converted into social currency.
Like, have you seen the new Spider-Man movie? Or the more imperative, you should definitely watch this. It's a transaction. You are offering your curated experience to someone else. But eventually, just describing the plot and recommending it isn't enough.
It really isn't.
Because what happens when you watch a movie with a friend and they thought the plot was amazing, but you thought the whole thing felt cheap and just poorly made?
Pointing at the narrative completely fails you in that moment. You can't just debate what happened anymore. You have inevitably started to debate how well it was executed.
And this requires an entirely new set of linguistic tools. You have to transition from being an explorer of the story to being a critic of the mechanics. The sources label this the B2 level.
It requires a fundamental break in the illusion. At the narrative level, you're immersed. You talk about the detective and the villain as if they're real people inhabiting a real world. But to become a critic, you must step outside the story.
You have to break the fourth wall for yourself.
Exactly. You must explicitly acknowledge that this is a constructed piece of art manufactured by professionals, and you are evaluating their labor.
So the vocabulary shifts from the imaginary to the literal. We stop talking about the brave main character, and we start evaluating the performance of the lead actor. We might say their performance was outstanding, or convincing, or powerful.
The word convincing is particularly telling there, I think. It implies that the actor's job is to persuade you of a lie, and you are judging the efficacy of their deception. We also start looking at the collective group of actors as the cast, and we evaluate their chemistry, that invisible, energetic interplay between them on screen.
So we judge the humans executing the vision, and then we judge the actual tools of the craft. The language here gets very specific. We talk about the screenplay or the script, separating the written story and dialogue from the spoken delivery. We judge if the script was witty or intelligent. And we introduce words like cinematography.
Cinematography is arguably the most powerful word at this critical level.
Oh, for sure.
It refers to the literal look of the film, the lighting, the camera angles, the color grading, the composition of the frame. Our sources offer a really vivid example phrase for this. The cinematography was breathtaking. Every shot looked like a painting.
Even just deploying that phrase in a conversation instantly elevates your status as a viewer. You aren't just watching a story, you are observing visual art. And we also bring in the score or the soundtrack, recognizing the music not just as background noise, but as a distinct mechanical lever being pulled to generate an emotional response.
By learning to identify the screenplay, the cinematography, and the score as separate entities, you are essentially acquiring a scalpel. You can now dissect the film into its constituent parts.
Okay, let's bring back the food analogy from earlier, but upgrade it. Earlier, you were just pointing at a picture of a hamburger. Now, with this critical vocabulary, you're a high-end food critic. You have the ability to separate the plating of the dish from the actual recipe itself. You can look at a meal and say, the presentation is gorgeous. The ambiance of the restaurant's perfect. The ingredients are high quality. But the chef fundamentally misunderstood the flavor profile and used way too much salt.
I love that. It allows you to hold conflicting truths about a single piece of media. A movie doesn't have to be entirely good or entirely bad. The sources provide a highly specific, very relatable scenario of how this plays out in real life.
Yes, the scenario where a movie looks great but completely fails. Let's unpack the anatomy of that failure using this critical language. Imagine you go to the theater. The cinematography is genuinely breathtaking. The score is sweeping and beautiful. The lead actress delivers a deeply powerful performance. But despite all of that technical brilliance, you walk out feeling completely hollow.
Because the scaffolding holding those beautiful elements together is rotten, using the critical vocabulary, you can diagnose the illness. The screenplay is full of cliches.
Cliches. overused ideas and stereotypes that rob the story of any originality.
Exactly. The plot is predictable. The characters are one-dimensional, meaning they lack the contradictions, flaws, and complexities that make real human beings interesting. They are just cardboard cutouts moving through a set.
Right.
And ultimately, all of this leads to an anticlimactic ending.
An anticlimax.
Yeah.
It's such a frustrating experience. It's the deflation of the balloon. You spend 2 hours building tension, waiting for a profound resolution, and the movie just fizzles out.
What is so powerful about possessing this specific critical language is that it prevents you from being gaslit by high production values.
Oh, that's a great point.
Without this vocabulary, you might watch that movie and think, well, it looked expensive and the music was loud, so I guess it was good, but I feel empty. But with the vocabulary, your scalpel allows you to clearly articulate that a one-dimensional, cliched script can completely neutralize breathtaking cinematography. You can diagnose exactly why it failed.
Which leads to what I consider the ultimate critical weapon in this arsenal, the word overrated.
Oh, man. It is a heavy word to drop in a conversation. In my opinion, the film is highly overrated.
I call it the phantom punch. Because when you label a movie overrated, you aren't just criticizing the film itself. You are issuing a critique of the surrounding culture. You are looking at the collective consensus of your peers or the critics or the box office, and you are saying, the crowd is wrong. They have been fooled. But my critical eye has seen the truth.
It is a profoundly confident linguistic move. It requires an immense amount of trust in your own analytical framework, to the point where you are willing to position your individual taste against the perceived majority.
So what does this all mean for how we measure success? Because speaking of the majority versus the critics, the sources outline several metrics of success that I think warrant some scrutiny. They give us terms like critically acclaimed, award-winning, and blockbuster. But the way these terms are colloquially used often sets them up as opposing forces. And I want to challenge that dichotomy a bit.
In what sense?
Well, the common implication is that a blockbuster is a movie that makes a massive amount of money, relies on explosions and CGI, and is inherently lacking in deep artistic value. Popcorn entertainment.
Right.
And this is usually contrasted with award-winning or critically acclaimed films, which are assumed to be quieter, more artistic, and perhaps less profitable. But does labeling a movie a blockbuster inherently strip it of artistic merit? We mentioned Christopher Nolan earlier. His films routinely make $1 billion. They're undeniable blockbusters. But they're also technically brilliant, conceptually complex, and heavily analyzed. Aren't we letting the language create a false wall between commerce and art?
I would argue that your pushback perfectly demonstrates the utility of critical language. You are interrogating the very labels we use to categorize success. And honestly, the history of the word blockbuster actually supports your skepticism.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it originally originated as a literal description of scale. It was a movie so popular that the lines of people waiting to buy tickets would literally bust around the city block. It was purely a metric of commercial volume.
It just meant butts and seats.
Exactly. But as the film industry industrialized, the language evolved. Blockbuster morphed from a metric of success into a genre unto itself, associated with massive budgets, heavy visual effects, and broad four-quadrant appeal. And you are right, critics often historically dismiss this category as lacking nuance.
Yeah.
So when you argue that a blockbuster can also be critically acclaimed, you are demanding that our vocabulary keep pace with the evolution of modern filmmaking. You are refusing to let an outdated definition limit your appreciation of a complex piece of art.
I think we have to constantly refuse the limits of the language. But even when we are engaging in this high-level criticism, debating the script, analyzing the cinematography, questioning the nature of a blockbuster, we're still, in many ways, just dealing with the surface of the movie. We're talking about how it was made, how it looks, and how it was received.
Which means there is one final summit to climb.
Right. Once you know how to deconstruct the mechanics, once you can easily spot the breathtaking cinematography and the witty script, you unlock the ability to see what those mechanics are actually hiding. We move from the surface of the screen to the deepest layer of cinematic art. This is the C1 and C2 level from our sources.
And this is where the viewer transitions from a consumer, and even from a critic, into a scholar. At this level, film is no longer viewed merely as entertainment, nor is it just a technical exercise to be graded. It is approached as a complex cultural text that both reflects the anxieties of the world and actively shapes them.
And the master key that unlocks this entire level of understanding is the concept of subtext.
Subtext is the invisible foundation upon which great art is built. The sources provide a very clean distinction here. The plot is what literally happens. The subtext is what the story is really about. It encompasses the underlying unspoken themes, ideas, and arguments that pulse beneath the surface narrative.
The example provided in the text is classic. On the surface, it's a monster movie, but its subtext is a powerful allegory for our fear of the unknown.
The word allegory is crucial here. An allegory is a narrative structure that operates entirely on two parallel tracks simultaneously.
Okay, lay that out for us.
Sure, so it has a literal meaning. A giant radioactive lizard emerges from the ocean and stomps through a city, destroying buildings. But it also has a hidden moral, psychological, or political meaning, like a society traumatized by war is grappling with the apocalyptic anxiety of the nuclear bomb.
And this highlights the magic of scaling your vocabulary. If you don't possess the concept of an allegory or subtext, you watch that movie and you just think, wow, the lizard smashed that building, that was awesome. Which, to be fair, is a perfectly fine way to spend a Friday night. It satisfies the foundational requirement of liking action and being scared.
Totally. But when you are armed with the scholarly vocabulary, the film physically expands in your mind. It ceases to be an isolated event on a screen and suddenly connects to history, to human psychology, to geopolitical tension. And to convey this subtext, directors don't usually rely on characters explicitly stating the themes in the dialogue. They rely on cinematic language.
Cinematic language. It sounds like a bit of an oxymoron, but it refers to how visual and auditory choices communicate directly with the subconscious. It's how the camera angles, the pacing of the edit, and symbolism, using tangible objects to represent abstract ideas, do the heavy lifting of the storytelling.
And we need to draw a very specific distinction here that the sources emphasize, which is the difference between a simple symbol and a motif.
Yes, let's dig into this, because this is where the scholarly viewing experience really fundamentally changes how your brain processes images. A symbol can be a one-off. You see a dove, you think of peace, you move on. But a motif is a recurring element. It's an object, a sound, or a visual pattern that repeats throughout the film with compounding symbolic significance.
The text provides a beautiful example of this. It's a director masterfully using a recurring visual motif of a broken clock as a symbol for the protagonist's fractured memory.
Let's actually visualize how this plays out for a viewer, because it perfectly illustrates the difference between observing a plot and reading a motif. Imagine a hypothetical movie. In scene 1, the protagonist is sitting in a diner, and the camera lingers for just 3 seconds on a wall clock where the second hand is twitching but not moving forward. It's broken.
If you are watching strictly for plot, your brain likely filters that image out entirely. It's just set dressing.
Exactly. Then, 40 minutes later, in scene 4, the protagonist is searching a drawer for a gun, but the camera focuses on a smashed pocket watch sitting next to it.
At this point, the plot-focused viewer might think, well, that's 2 broken timepieces. Maybe this town has a terrible watch repair industry.
Right.
It registers as a quirk of the art department, nothing more.
But then we reach the climax of the film. The protagonist is confronting the villain, and the entire scene takes place inside the gears of a massive abandoned clock tower that hasn't ticked in years.
This is the moment of realization. If you possess the concept of a motif, those 3 disparate images suddenly snap together in your mind, forming a constellation of meaning. You realize the director isn't just decorating the set, they're using the physical environment to communicate a psychological truth that the protagonist cannot articulate.
It's brilliant.
The repetition of the broken clocks is telling you that the main character's mind is stuck in time, unable to process their trauma, fragmented and frozen.
The visual language is doing the heavy lifting of the emotional narrative. When you see it, it's exhilarating. It feels like you are reading the director's mind. But I have to ask, is there a danger of overanalysis here?
Oh, that's the big question.
Right. When we arm ourselves with this high-level scholarly vocabulary, when we are constantly on the hunt for subtext and motifs, are we sometimes just reading too much into a broken clock? Maybe the prop department just had a sale on vintage watches. Is it safe to assume that every single visual choice is intentionally placed there by a genius director to communicate a profound truth?
You're touching on one of the most eternal and vicious debates in literary and film theory. It's often referred to as the intentional fallacy. Does it actually matter if the director consciously meant to put the broken clock there, if the audience genuinely receives a profound meaning from it? Does the art belong to the creator's intent or the audience's interpretation?
That is a deep rabbit hole.
It is a very deep rabbit hole, but to your point, this scholarly level of vocabulary does inherently assume a very high degree of intentionality and authorship, which is precisely why the sources introduce the concept of the director director's oeuvre.
Ah, yes. Spelled O-E-U-V-R-E, pronounced oeuvre.
Oeuvre!
It's a heavy, French, distinctly academic term, and it means a director's entire lifetime body of work.
When you zoom out from a single film and look at an oeuvre, the debate over whether the broken clock was a coincidence largely disappears. Because you aren't just looking for a motif in one movie, you are searching for stylistic signatures and recurring thematic obsessions that persist across multiple different films made over decades.
The sources give an example of analyzing a director's oeuvre and finding a persistent, career-long exploration of, quote, the conflict between individual freedom and societal conformity.
When you engage in this level of analysis, you are essentially arguing that a master filmmaker isn't just making a series of disconnected, entertaining stories. You are arguing that they are spending their entire adult life wrestling with one massive, complicated, philosophical idea, approaching it from different angles, through different genres over their entire career.
So The Broken Clock in their thriller from 1995 is intellectually connected to The Frozen River in their romance from 2010 because the director is fundamentally obsessed with the concept of halted time. You are connecting dots on a massive macro scale.
Exactly. And this macro level of analysis also gives us the tools to see how movies argue not just with themselves, but with society at large. This is what the sources refer to as social commentary.
Which brings up one of my absolute favorite cinematic concepts, subverting a genre.
Subverting expectations is an incredibly potent tool for social commentary. It involves taking a familiar, well-established category, like our old foundational friend, the action movie, or the classic Western, and intentionally twisting the established rules, tropes, and moral centers to make a sharp cultural point.
The sources provide a highly poignant, specific example of this. It's about subverting the classic Western genre by telling the story from the perspective of the indigenous population, rather than centering the narrative on the cowboys or the settlers.
To understand why that is subversive, you really have to understand the cognitive contract of the traditional Western. The classic Western is built on very specific dominant cultural myths. It relies on the idea of the brave, rugged settler pushing out into a wild, untamed, unknown frontier to bring civilization. It has a built-in heroism that audiences accepted without question for decades.
But when a filmmaker subverts that framework, they use the recognizable visual language of the Western against the audience. They give you the wide sweeping landscapes, the horseback riding, the tense shootouts, but they completely flip the moral axis.
Yes. By centering the indigenous perspective, the frontier is no longer perceived as unknown or wild. It is a home, a civilization that is actively being invaded. The heroic settler, previously the protagonist, becomes a terrifying antagonist. The violence that was previously celebrated as righteous expansion is recontextualized as brutal colonization.
It fundamentally challenges long-held historical myths. It forces the audience to endure a profound discomfort, realizing that the genres they have comfortably consumed as just entertainment for decades are actually constructed from a very specific, often exclusionary, dominant point of view.
And when a film manages to execute that successfully, when it effectively subverts a beloved genre, introduces a powerful subtext, and speaks directly to the anxieties or the shifting morality of the society watching it, we elevate our language one final time. We begin to talk about its cultural impact and its legacy.
We stop asking if the movie was good, and we start asking the monumental questions. Did it break new ground? Did it influence the next generation of filmmakers? Did it manage to capture the zeitgeist?
The zeitgeist. It is a brilliant, encompassing word. It translates roughly to the defining spirit or mood of a particular period of history.
When a piece of art captures the zeitgeist, it transcends the screen. It doesn't just reflect the world back at us. It actually explains the world to the people who are currently living in it, struggling to understand their own moment in time.
It becomes the ultimate campfire story because suddenly everyone in the culture, the critics, the scholars, the casual viewers, they are all standing around the exact same fire, pointing at the flames and collectively saying, yes, that is exactly what it feels like to be alive right now.
It is incredibly rare when a film achieves that level of resonance.
Yeah.
And it is incredibly powerful that we have developed the linguistic architecture to articulate it when it happens.
Which I think brings us to a natural moment of synthesis. If we look back at the massive territory we have covered through these sources today, we can clearly see how seamlessly these levels of language build upon one another, scaffolding the human experience of art.
We really did start out on the ground floor, just trying to find our bearings. We used basic verbs to establish our boundaries. We pointed at broad categories and simply said, I like comedies, or Tom Hanks makes good movies. We established our fundamental emotional baseline.
And then from there, we evolved into explorers. We realized that static preferences weren't enough to share our experiences, so we learned to track the narrative causality. We identified the brave heroes and the cunning villains, and we found the words to articulate the manufactured suspense of the binge watch and the weaponized cliffhanger. We learned to summarize the plot so we could recommend the thrill to others.
But then we hit the wall of execution, and we had to sharpen our knives and become critics. We broke the illusion of the story and started dissecting the mechanics of the machine. We praised breathtaking cinematography and powerful, convincing performances, but we ruthlessly diagnosed the failures of one-dimensional characters, cliched screenplays, and anticlimactic endings. We even learned how to throw the phantom punch and call a cultural phenomenon overrated.
And finally, having mastered the mechanics, we summited the mountain as scholars. We looked past the surface imagery to unearth allegories and subtext. We connected seemingly random visual motifs, like a broken clock, to a director's grand career-spanning oeuvre. We analyzed how subverting the comfortable tropes of a genre can challenge deep-seated cultural myths and ultimately capture the defining zeitgeist of an era.
It perfectly reiterates the core thesis that we drew from these sources today. Watching a movie is not just a passive act of staring at shifting light on a wall. It is the beginning of a conversation. And that conversation can be as brief and simple or as infinitely complex and profound as the film itself. The language you choose to deploy dictates the depth of the reality you experience.
Your vocabulary acts as the literal lens through which your brain processes the art.
Which leaves me with the final lingering thought for you, the listener, to mull over before we extinguish the campfire. We have spent this entire deep dive establishing that the words we learn allow us to talk about a movie differently, to debate it more effectively. But if it is true that the language we possess actively shapes how our brains fundamentally perceive the world, does learning this deeper scholarly vocabulary actually change what you physically see on the screen? Once you have firmly planted the concepts of subtext, motif, and allegory into your mind, will you ever be able to just casually watch a simple monster movie on a Friday night again? Or will your brain be forever altered, cursed, or perhaps blessed to constantly search the shadows of every single frame, looking for the hidden meaning?
That is a deeply fascinating and perhaps slightly haunting question to leave them with.